Hi there, I am Danny Flexen, joined by Ayman, Khan, and delighted to welcome you to an impromptu edition of SO Live. I was so devastated that everyone seems to be having fun in my absence on Monday evening that I demanded we do a bespoke one just for me this Wednesday. No, we're actually here to cover some breaking news, or it appears to be breaking news. We've only heard this thus far from Conor Benn himself, but he says that after a hearing from a national anti-doping panel, he has now been cleared to fight. No further details, and we will flash up the tweet in due course, but no real further details there. I have reached out to Robert Smith at the Board of Control to find out, and we know that Ayman will tell you a bit more about who a journalist friend of his has reached out to, but no further information as yet in terms of if there's a backdated ban involved. It says in Conor Benn's tweet he was cleared of any wrongdoing, but until we see the report or a statement from the panel or from UKAD, we can't confirm that officially. Ayman, you alerted me to this news. What was your initial reaction?
Well, the initial reaction was in the past few weeks or past times in which we've been asking for updates on Conor Benn's situation, on the saga, the ongoing saga as to the positive test, as to what is the next step, what is the next element. Quite a few times when we or other colleagues of ours in the industry had asked Eddie the question, it always seemed to be, or Frank Smith the question, it always seemed to be 2 weeks, 2 weeks. When we wait in 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and keep pushing back until maybe it kind of died down a bit of the conversation about it, and then something might pop up in the future. We didn't know if anything would come up of it, and it was just keeping pushing back time until something eventually happened. And I guess this is the something that's eventually happened. There appears to have been, according to Conor Benn's statement here, and Eddie Hearn actually as well too, in reaction to the full statement, a full hearing on Conor Benn's case by the National Anti-Doping Panel, and he says, and we wait for the official confirmation from the National Anti-Doping Panel and others, UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control, would be great as well if they could break their silence, that he's cleared now of any wrongdoing, and also says that he states here cleared of any wrongdoing, and also states he was innocent as well too, um, and never had a case, didn't have a case to answer to as well. My initial reaction was look great in the sense of, and I did feel the fans fatigue and some fatigue in the industry that this has kept on going on here. This saga had kept on boiling on for years now. So it's great that we seemingly have an end to it, but also I feel somewhat hollow as to this statement so far. And sure, we've hopped on this. It's a breaking news segment, and we wanted to talk about this alongside those in the chat as well and people listening onto this. But we also need to know what is it, what has been said at the hearing, what has led to Ben being cleared to fight. We can't just get Ben's cleared to fight now. Let's all move on. We need to have a reason. Hardcore boxing fans don't just accept things that are given to them. Hardcore boxing fans really care, and boxing fans or sports fans in general really care about drugs in the sport, drugs being a big issue. So therefore, I feel that hopefully we'll get some further context to this. We'll get some further explanation as to what happened here. And if Ben is, like he says, clear, then hopefully we get that information fed out to the fans as well too, and then we can all move on from that. So I guess in that sense as well, in anticipation of those further statements, hopefully we can see an end to that saga, but we need a little bit more.
Busy Googling some previous cases just to get an idea of exactly what's gone on. Because I believe, I'm just looking at this now, Enzo Macronelli was once banned for 6 months for his use of a performance-enhancing drug. He proved beyond doubt that he couldn't have known that he was ingesting it. They brought samples of the product in its packaging, and the ingredient was not listed either in the packaging or on the company's website, if I recall correctly. I was just reading the story, the contemporary story there. And he still got a 6-month ban despite that mitigation. So while Conor is saying he's been cleared of any wrongdoing, we're no reason to doubt that. It could be that he's unknowingly ingested something with the substance in it. And if he has done it unknowingly, he would have been cleared of any wrongdoing, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't have received a ban. And of course, he hasn't fought in the UK for quite some time. So this could easily be a backdated ban, similar to when Tyson Fury stopped fighting with a British license after his ban alongside his cousin Huey. But again, we don't know until we see a statement from UKAD, from the panel, or from the Board of Control, which I'm sure they'll put out a statement probably tomorrow. We won't know exactly what's happened. It's also unsure at the present time whether Conor Benn will now apply afresh for a British license. And, are the board now obligated, as if he has been cleared, are the board now obligated to give him that British license and allow him to fight once again in the UK? Because I don't think it's as simple as they've said he's not had any wrongdoing and now his suspension's been lifted so he can fight. The suspension was always there and stopping him from applying for a British license. There was no point because of that. So until they had this panel hearing, there was no issue. Like, the board wouldn't consider a license application from Conor Benn until this was sorted. Because let's not forget, the appeal that went before the panel was brought by the British Boxing Board of Control and UKAD. It was an appeal against the original decision to lift the suspension. So, yes, his suspension appears to be now lifted. As far as we're aware, he's been cleared of any wrongdoing. But does that mean a fight in the UK is imminent? Does that mean the board have come around and that talks have gone on behind closed doors, or, quietly, and everyone now wants to move on? We hope so, for the good of the sport, but it would be good to have a bit more clarity on the situation, because as Ayman alluded to there, the statement that Ben put out and the fact that it was just Ben putting it out and then Eddie Hearn endorsing it, and Eddie Hearn did hint at a big comeback in his tweet, it does raise more questions than answers, unfortunately. And I don't think that does Conor Benn any favours either. It would have been good if, I'm sure there's some documentation to go in with the panel's judgment, some written documentation. It'd be good if he could have just posted one page of that, like the main page that says, yeah, this is what's happening, verdict, basically that. I think that would have gone a long way to assuaging any doubts that might be out there still. But I guess we should look to the future and assume for the moment that Conor Benn is going to come back to the sport in the UK. And what that means, is it going to be the long-awaited and for some overdue or, outdated Chris Eubank Jr. fight? Or is it, going back to a quest for world titles? Ayman, I'll go to the chat in a minute, but what do you think?
Just before we do that, I don't know if Vinny is able to, if he can put up the statement from Conor Benn, I'll read that out. If not, I'll read that out now anyways. It says from Conor Benn, if you haven't seen this chat as to the statement, he reads as also. The first instance, that there was no case to answer and I was free to fight. As someone who is so passionate about boxing and an advocate for clean sport, I hope now I have been cleared. It can be understood why I have maintained my innocence so strongly throughout. As a man of God, I bear no ill will toward UKAD or the British Boxing Board of Control. We have a shared ambition of a clean sport, and I look forward to reconciling with the board and moving forward together. I would like to thank my fans that have stood by me. Your support has never and will never go unnoticed. And of course, my friends and family, all of whom have displayed an unwavering belief in me. Only with the strength of all this support have I made it through. I'd also like to thank Matchroom and Everlast, as their steadfast support ensured that I could see the process through to a full conclusion. I've stayed disciplined and focused despite the challenges faced, which is a testament to my desire to be great. I'm relieved to finally close this chapter, and I'm excited to get back in the ring to realize my ultimate potential. Who wants it next? Conor Benn. So that was the full statement from Conor Benn. If you haven't read it as well, it's flashed up on the screen as well too, so you could read along there, and it's out on his social medias. If you want to check out, and Eddie Hearn as well has since responded to it. Just before I answer that question, Danny, a little bit of disappointment in the sense of when it comes to kind of the silence from the board. And I do hope that statement does come, because when it comes to being out in the field and wanting to kind of get whether updates come in the form of on record or off record, my kind of want to speak to Robert Smith and desire to speak to Robert Smith to hear that side of it is when I've chased Robert for it, he's always kind of been shut down those opportunities. I think once I was able to speak to Robert, and then since afterwards, whenever I've tried to speak to Robert, that's always been shut down, which has been a shame. And then Robert had gone to Talk Sport to speak, and I guess that's a way of getting the message out. But those kind of statements as well too had sort of quieting down as well. And then in the face of Ben and Eubank Jr. in Saudi Arabia kind of getting in the ring and doing that face-off whilst the suspension was still imposed as well too. It was kind of a shame to not hear anything back as to why that was allowed at that point. Now, this seems to be as to why, whether this was cleared as the day of or this was being, I guess, ready to go. This statement, I've just waited for the appropriate time. I'm not too sure, but when it comes to the fight specifically, yeah, I think there's only really one fight that stands out there, and it's the fight that them were trying to make before the suspension, before the saga, and that's Chris Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. wanted to have Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn wanted to fight each other. That had to be put to the side for a while. Chris Eubank Jr. has since been back out in the ring, and they've been waiting for what was deemed to be in a tune-up fight against Camaro Zarameta. And it was, rewind a couple of months before that, maybe the possibility of Chris Eubank Jr. and Canelo Alvarez being in the ring. That's now been shut down despite the conversational small conversations, as noted by Ben Shalom, who since said that there's been maybe a little bit of a communication issue, and he had been speaking to Canelo's lawyer on that, although Eddie Reynoso has since shut that down and said that, look, we don't want Eubank Jr. He's missed his opportunity, to paraphrase him, and it'll be anyone but Eubank Jr., to paraphrase what Reynoso had said there. So with that big fight out of contention, the kind of possibility of Crawford or Golovkin maybe, but those are kind of little loose threads up in the air. What is straight now apparent and in front of them, if this statement is to be taken alongside official confirmation from the other relevant sources as well too, the only fight there, I guess, now is Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, Danny.
So just before I get onto the chat, I've just sent Conor a message on Instagram. I can't promise that he'll read it before we come off air, but I've sent him the link to the live stream. So if he does fancy coming on and stating his own case, and presumably his delight at being cleared to fight in the UK, then he's more than welcome. But we shall see. I haven't had a reply from Robert Smith at the board or from Conor Benn so far, so I'm 0 for 2 striking out at the moment. But let's hope that doesn't continue. Just going to the chat, Cliff Coulton, rather predictably, says excellent. Very good, Cliff. The Truth Channel says, great news, about time. Let's get it on Conor. If you're going to be so supportive of the Truth Channel, you've got to at least spell his name correctly, I'm afraid. This is your one and only warning. Thunder Road says the Seconds Out live chat is not official until DB Cooper arrives. Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be like a big night at the Dog and Duck for DB Cooper. So we shall see. Big Dosser, just equally predictable as Cliff Coulton, says excellent news. This is going to be a long live show. Ainsley Shan.
Let me just stop you there. This is one of those things, though, actually, and you just reminded me, because this is what's going to, even though the statements come out, unless you kind of give those reasons, unless you kind of give those explanations as to why and what happened, unless you're really kind of full and honest and give those details, boxing fans and hardcore fans are unforgiving. This will follow him completely, regardless of the statements that are put out. The other day, in fact, it was Halloween, I think around that time, Matchroom Boxing put out a social post, and it was about Conor Benn and about him ready to return or whatever it was. But either way, they put out a post, a picture of Ben, and all the comments were just slating Conor as to this whole saga, and they were related, as they had been related in these comments, to eggs and such. This sort of thing is going to follow him unless they kind of give. It can't just be kind of, look, he's ready to fight now. Got to have some more than just this, otherwise this will continue.
And what goes with eggs? Sausage. And that's what Ainsley Shand has called Conor Benn in the next chat. He says, does not change anything how he went on. He's still a sausage. He thinks he's better than what he really is. Someone's going to mention bacon at some point, I'm sure. CC4 and Ainsley Shand both speculating on a silent ban. We can neither confirm nor deny it as it stands. Thunder Road says the A-team is back after the Carabao Cup duo on Monday. Bit harsh on the Josh special that we put out on Monday evening. You can never get too much of Josh, although the Vinnyographer, Modfather Vinny, decided not to use one of the Joshes as the thumbnail in our group chat on WhatsApp. So that was a bit disappointing. It was a big week for them. I feel like, he's brought them down a peg or two. He's brought them back to earth. CC4 says, Conor Benn gets 2 years. We don't know if that's true. And Liam Cameron gets 4 years for sniffing powder. Again, we don't know that's true either, because Liam Cameron to this day denies ingesting cocaine, for which he was banned. I remember his stated reason was that it was on some banknotes that he'd handled, I believe. Frederick Longon says, is he cleared to fight in the UK? I believe that's what he's alluding to, because the panel was talking about his status in the UK specifically. It was UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control who brought the appeal to the panel. C4 says, Eddie is trying to get his investment back in the first 2 fights. Yes, Danny, 2 million eggs, lol. Brilliant. Amy Maria says, finally cleared, with a party popper emoji. So she's happy, I believe. Lewis Hart says, yes, boys, in the style of Pretty Deadly for all you WWE fans out there. AZ Shan says, the people he calls out and he's not even proven himself makes me sick. I mean, yeah, we could turn this into a whole kind of referendum on Conor Benn as a person, but I don't think that's really what we're talking about today. Thunder Road. Oh, no, sorry, not Thunder Road. C4 says, Danny, hi, mate. What does this say about the boxing elite being treated differently than the smaller guys who can't afford this nor have the backing? I mean, it depends what's actually happened. We're quite short on detail at the moment, but if it is a kind of retroactive ban and it was 2 years, I mean, that's still pretty, I'm not going to say harsh, but it's pretty a lengthy ban, isn't it? Especially if the panel did, as Conor Benn asserts, except that he bore no wrongdoing for what happened. I mean, 2 years is pretty chunky. Yes, we know he was able to fight overseas during some of that time, but the Board of Control can only, they only have jurisdiction over their own country. Tommy O says what he means is he served his ban. Well, that's not what he said. Laura says not proven himself. Justin Ben, presumably a relation. Please let us know if you are. Might need to show us a copy of your passport or driver's license. It says no ban, actually. Toby Bartlett says salute Danny, Ayman in the chat. Salute to you too, Toby. Tommy O says bollocks. Incorrectly spelt, but it's always nice to say that word. I know Frank Warren likes it a lot as well. Jay Sharp says free range Ben with an emoji of a chicken. What a shocker. Ainsley Shand, he will always be a bad egg in my eyes. It's just I've just made it worse, haven't I? I've provoked it. Dara O'Malley says silent ban like Fury. We did talk about the Fury issue a little while ago. Toby Bartlett, hopefully everything can and will come out in the open now, and we'll see what went on behind the scenes. I mean, I think both parties, it would be a good thing if they could publish the actual report. No one's going to read all of it, are they? But at least the salient points. Charles Lee, mismatch Ben jumping up 2 weight divisions. Eubanks will be too big for him. Mike Adams, he served the ban then. Lewis Hart, Team Flexen 0-2, been skittled by a few early wickets from the fast bowlers. All right, Lewis Hart, I suppose you've got Robert Smith on speed dial with you and fucking Conor Benn on Skype at the same time. Truth Wins UK, it will all be about Eubank versus Ben now. Think Ben gets a tune-up first, then do it in May or something, says Mr. Luca. Mark Davis, he is the Eggman, which is, I hope, a reference to the classic Beatles song, I Am the Walrus. Zambanu Love, because everyone loves the Beatles, right? Zambanu Love says, best possible outcome, probably a silent ban. Timeout is suspiciously 2 years. Everyone knows, and hopefully timeout has curtailed his career. UKAD/boxing was never going to officially publicly punish Ben. Abdul Rahim says, hi everyone, how are you all doing? Assalamu alaikum. Blessing for everyone. Many thanks. Cheers, mate. Always good to have some support. Luke Fury says, Conroyed Eggs Ben Addict is no longer shadow banned by the BBBFC. That's far too convoluted a pun there, Luke Fury. It isn't your real name, is it? Danny Gilfillan, SO Live on a Wednesday. Get the kettle on, love. Nice. Not sure who he's talking to, mum or girlfriend or partner, but or boyfriend. We don't judge here at Seconds Out. Danny Gilfillan. Lewis Hartcoin, Danny Gilfillan, a melt. Danny Gilfillan responds, sappening. This is how the youth of today speak, people. Don't go onto Boxing Social anytime soon or Pro Boxing fans, because this is what you'll get, this youth banter. Zambanu Love says, PED testing in boxing makes 0 sense. It's up to authorities to prove intent. That's not how it's meant to work. So unprofessional. Truth Wins UK, Conor Hen. Suppose it's a different one. 2 emojis of eggs. Luke Fury's laughing. Everyone's having a good time. I suppose that's the most important thing. But no one more so than Conor Benn, who will feel vindicated at this point. He's protested his innocence for the last 2 years. And I guess assuming everything does check out, and again, I have to underline the fact that we haven't, I know I sound like a stock record for anyone who knows what records are. I'm sure Lewis Hart and Gil Fillon don't. But yeah, I might sound like a stock record, but Conor Benn, nothing's been confirmed by an independent party or by UKAD or the board yet, only by Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn. But I don't think he'd make it as public as he has if he wasn't sure of the P's and Q's involved. So, yeah, I am in some senses happy that Conor Benn, not that he's been vindicated, but that he can get on with his career, because he's done a lot of talking over the past year, probably mostly out of frustration that he's not been able to do the actual fighting, certainly not in the UK for some time. And once the Board of Control started administering the shows out in Saudi as well for Riyadh season, that seemingly shut another door temporarily in Benn's face. So he'll be delighted that he can finally kick on with his career. He's still in his 20s, of course. Father of 2 now, I believe. So a family to provide for. And it'll be great for him and his family that he can get back on the horse, so to speak. And I'm sure he'll be wanting to renew hostilities with Chris Eubank Jr. as soon as possible. Ayman, I haven't seen anything online yet, but what do you think Chris Eubank Jr.'s reaction will be, considering, that press conference where he made comments that he hastily apologised for? One of his key criticisms there was knowing that Conor Benn had failed the test and still trying to make him fight, although, obviously he was very keen to fight as well in his own right. What will his reaction be if Conor Benn is indeed completely innocent?
I think Eubank Jr. is likely to straddle both lines, to be fair, as he does so well. And whatever gets under Conor Benn's skin is good for Chris Eubank Jr., to be fair. So I imagine and anticipate that something in the effect of Eubank Jr. not believing Conor Benn's current position will come out maybe soon. Maybe it won't, but that might be his feeling stepping into his shoes just to rile him up, and all this in effort for the eventual fight there. I think Eubank Jr. understands the business side of things. I think Eubank Jr. wants this fight. I think Eubank Jr. was it not the claim from the other side as well too, that they were asking for a certain amount of money to continue on with the fight. I think the $1 million or £1 million was banded about. I'm pretty sure that was what was claimed from one side here. I think Eubank Jr. is probably, in all honesty, pretty happy that he can have this fight now and either deliver, I guess, for some people, some form of in-ring justice, I guess. Maybe that's what Eubank Jr., the sort of what's the word I want to use, the cloak he might don for this fight. But bottom line is, I think he wanted the fight because he wants the money here. This was a big money fight for him, and when money fights are falling out of line for him now, like I mentioned before, with Canelo Alvarez being shut in his face for the moment, there aren't too many of those about there. And when money fights were big in the UK, and now since Conor Benn's absence from the ring, or at least in a UK ring over the last couple of years, as also we've seen the shift from UK and US over to Saudi. Those big money fights in the UK have now become even bigger money fights over in Saudi. So to be honest with you, I think Eubank Jr. is probably very happy right now that this has all been, this apparently, as it seems to be right now, is all settled, and they can move on with making the fight happen early next year and getting that on, the fight between the two. Because whenever these two have interacted, and it seemed like the first time round when it first was banded about, when Kalle Sauerland threw out a little social media image just to tease it, and he was one of the real originators. Of course, kind of people spoke about it, but as to if it could really kind of happen there, Kalle pushed it out. And then when it sort of happened the first time around, it was more about the fathers and what they done, and the sons stepping in and inheriting the beef, as was talked about on SO Live between anyway Shabazz Masood and Liam Davis. That triumvirate, that inherited beef between the two of them had been passed down to the sons. And since then, since that fell off, those two have been back and forth. And maybe, even though we've had, and a lot of people will agree on Denzel Bentley's opinion, as was stated on Seconds Out as well too. You can check that interview. The feeling that it might be contrived. I think the rivalry between the two, for whatever reason, has now become a lot more natural. I do wonder how Eubank Jr. might approach that though, because if this is the fight to make, will Eubank Jr. bite his tongue a little bit? He hasn't recently. He seems to be a lot more less of giving a fuck. To be honest with you, I won't pardon my words here. That's the truth. We've seen it, and then even after that apology came, I think he still reposted it on his social media maybe a week after the heat died down. Eubank Jr. doesn't really care. So that if that ever materializes, the fight as it seems to be now, I think there'll still be a lot of play in the saga, in the fight as well. So yeah, I think bottom line here, I think Eubank Jr. is pretty happy.
I apologise for laughing midway through Ayman's statement there, which is very serious matters, of course. But Danny Gilfillan, after I criticised him, has come up with an absolute corker, I've got to say. Is Ayman serving a silent ban from his barber? I think the barber's serving the silent ban, surely.
I just had the haircut. You can see the short back and sides, the long top. I've just come back. Well, I recently come back from a gym session. I've come down now from, I started at 13.5. I'm now down to 12 stone 8. And that was when I was wet as well, too. Still had sweat all up in my hair and things. So I haven't sorted it out soon. There was breaking news that developed, and don't matter my appearance, doesn't matter my attire. I'm working here. No part-timers here, full-timers on the grind completely at any moment. Any time, any place, anywhere was the saying once said by a current heavyweight, and I embody that here at Seconds Out Live. So we're here anytime, any place, anywhere. No matter how bad the haircut looks. Any hair. Anywhere, any hair.
Big Dosser says full English breakfast, extra eggs. This got boring like the first one. I'm struggling here. Zambanu Love, hopefully Eubank fights Canelo and retires. Well, yeah, I mean, that is a natural consequence of that fight, I imagine. But no, I'm not sure it's going to happen. I'll talk about Eubank in a minute anyway. Proddy Papa says, good stuff. This will be a great scrap for bragging rights. Zambanu Love, didn't Matchroom and Ben hide the first failed test from Eubank? He only found out if Ben failed the second. I don't know if they actually hid it from him or if he found out later on. We don't want to accuse anyone of anything. Obviously, I mean, the chat can, but we can't. Big Dosser says, eggtastic. Surely it should have been eggstatic. Lewis Hart is just laughing still to himself like a madman rocking in the corner. Behind the Nut says, finally. Truth Wins UK says, exciting. And when I saw that the first time, I read it as egg sitting, which is obviously what a hen does. Luke Fury says, Eubank better insist on 160, no restrictions. A rehydration clause could ruin him. He ruined himself by going to 168 for a few years. 160 is tight now. I think it might have been tight anyway, though, because he's always been very muscular and he was getting on in his age and his career. So I think 160 was always going to be trouble, even if he'd remained at that weight. It might have even been harder. Big Dosser, exciting news. Zambanu Love might want to wear a cap next show, Ayman.
Already
depends if the silent band's ongoing, surely. Sergio Notapippo says, if Eubank has this fight, he's finished. Even his own dad said it's dangerous. Keep your original weight. Luke Fury says, I'm so offended. Please apologise for the bad language. Yeah, we apologise for the strong and frequent language there. Have you ever heard that on a bit of a segue, but have you ever heard that on Netflix and the other channels? They say, apologise for strong and frequent language. That's wrong, isn't it? It's frequent, strong language. It should be, because obviously language is frequent. You're talking all the time. Just a little bugbear there. Big Chungus, did Ayman mention he goes to the gym? Ayman, have you been working out? Trying to. Luke Fury, Eddie Hearn hid it from the public or tried to until it got leaked to the papers. We don't know that to be true, and we're not endorsing those comments here at Seconds Out. Big Dosser says 160 at 35 years old. Ouch. Mate, at 43 years old, I'd love to be 160. Let's not go there. Behind the Nut, Ben versus Eubank has to be next, because if Eubank fights Canelo, then Canelo will retire him. You've just stolen my line from like 2 minutes ago. Dara O'Malley, Conor Benn hasn't won a British title. What level is he actually? I'd say he's beaten some people that are probably beyond British level, though, in fairness. But we can talk about that another time. Thunder Road says, Danny, I forgot to ask 2 weeks ago, but did you finally get invited to Frank Warren's hospitality box at the Emirates for Arsenal-Liverpool? I didn't. I mean, I should have reached out to him, because when I was watching the game, I said to on TV, I said to my son, I could maybe have gone to this match, but I never raised it with Warren. Although we had said to each other about what the result would be and stuff and had a bit of banter. So, yeah, that was my opening, and I didn't. So I know what you're asking. I still haven't been inside Frank Warren's box. Big Dosser, you lift, brah? I think that's for you, Ayman. The General GC says, I won't struggle with heat payments this winter. My neighbour's blind, so I steal his oil. Jesus. He's getting worse. Behind the Nut says, I came on only a minute ago. My condolences. I hope you've got the necessary equipment. But yeah, so Eubank Jr. clearly not going to fight Canelo. And I think he needs Conor Benn more than Conor Benn needs him at this point. You know, Conor Benn's still young in his career and young, generally as well. And there are other fights you could make for Conor Benn that won't make as much money as Eubank Jr., it's fair to say, but we'll still see him all right and probably less risky as well because he won't have to step up to 160 for them. I think Chris Eubank Jr., now the Canelo fight's been officially ruled out by Eddie Reynoso in the Canelo camp. He needs this Conor Benn fight. Who else is he going to fight that's going to do anything for him? You know, we've heard from, who was it that said, I think it might have been Sam Jones, said that he believes both Hamza Shiraz and Conor Benn both knock out Eubank Jr. Then you've got the likes of Janny Beck and some of the world title holders at 160. You wouldn't make Eubank Jr. a favourite against any of them. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. Ayman, is there anyone else out there for Eubank, or does he almost have to fight Conor Benn?
Yeah, I mean, there are fights out there for Eubank Jr. And like you mentioned there, like if the money was an issue, and apparently that was a thing that it never got through to Chris as to how much was apparently on offer for the Hamza Shiraz fight. If it's big money, he might eventually take it. I remember saying to Hamza Shiraz, what happens in your career is you beat good fighters, you get up your way to the top, and then when you get to the top, the other guys that are there as well say, well, I haven't heard of this guy. I don't know who he is. Who is he beat? Kind of thing. The profile apparently isn't there. They haven't seen apparently the fights. Well, Eubank Jr. I don't think will care too much about the fights that he's seen or not seen, but more the figures that are in front of him. So maybe if they can match the figure that Eubank Jr. wants, even if it's silly money might be something that gets him and might be something that's available to get Hamza Shiraz and Eubank Jr. in the ring potentially. One was surprised to see the trilogy fight between Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr. I think Liam Smith really, really wants that fight. I think he'd be highly motivated for that fight. I think it really sticks in his mind that he feels that someone that he believes Eubank Jr. at level or not at level, I guess is a better way to say it, had beaten him. And he was also that feeling of ill will towards the promotion boxer as to him being in the ring in the first place because of some injuries that really kind of curtailed his performance there. He wants to really right the wrong that happened in the second fight. So if you can get a third down, and again, if the money's there, I think Eubank Jr. will take, and he'll feel confident as well too as to the way the second fight went there for him. So Liam Smith might be an option as well. Titles don't seem to be an option. Janna Beck, I'd love to see Eubank Jr. I think Eubank Jr. is a capable fighter. And outside of an IBO world title, I think he's capable of winning, or was at least at one point capable of winning a world title. I would have probably backed him against the likes of Golteri, who held a world title, and I think he did lose in the unification fight against Janabek, of course. I would have backed Eubank Jr. to probably beat Golteri then. Whether I back him to beat Alan Kanuli, probably not at this point, but he's faltered in fights, and Bentley came really close. Bentley, a real good fighter. So I think in another career, Eubank Jr., if he'd done it a bit differently, could have won a world title and put those real kind of doubts that so infamously the likes of Prince Nassim Hamid had about him and where he should go after high-profile defeats. Otherwise, though, that's it really. I think I remember suggesting the possibility that Terence Crawford and Gennady Golovkin might enter in the ring, and those eventually were shot down, and that doesn't seem to be happening. But in terms of Eubank Jr.'s career also features a fight with Golovkin that never happened. And now that Golovkin's sort of retired, although he's not officially retired, and he says he's interested in interesting offers and interesting projects, and even though he's taken up an interesting project with the committee regarding the Olympics in his home country, I think a project in getting back in the ring would interest him. And it would also interest Eubank Jr., who might see Golovkin as a scalp he can take now that he's outside of the ring, whether there's enough money that can coax Golovkin out of this semi-retirement and get Eubank Jr. in the ring with him, that might be something that features. Otherwise, that's about it. I think Conor Benn is the main one. Conor Benn will be treated as the priority. And I think Conor Benn is the fight that we get next. Sans any tune-up for Conor Benn. Although Ben has said himself, I don't need a tune-up. I don't want a tune-up. It's big fights and big fights only. Let's see if he keeps to that as well.
All right, just going back to the chat. These aren't all about Conor Benn. I've got to warn you in advance. Abdul Rahim's asking about the effect of Riyadh season on boxing, but that's a whole separate podcast, unfortunately. Behind the Nut asks, are you the guy from Plebs? Big Chunga says, what happened to Flexpectations? Or he calls it Flexpect. Oh, no, it is Flexpect. He has spelled it correctly. Apologies, Big Chungus. And are we ever going to get conjectures, which I quite like as a pun? Flexpectations is a distant memory now. But yeah, it was when I was first on Seconds Out. We didn't have any regular content, and that was all a good thing to do, to have content at a regular time every week so people would tune in for it and stuff. It did pretty well for a couple of years, and then obviously we got a bigger team and more content and did better, and we didn't need it anymore, and it's low production values. But yeah, conjectures, we'll have to have a think about that one. But Ayman, what about your regular interview segment that we started a little while ago? When's the next one of those coming out? I've been enjoying them.
I am hoping to land a very, very big interview next week. I won't say too much as to who it is, but hopefully I'll have someone that everyone will be tuning into. And it'll be a good streak, to be fair, to go from Shane McGuigan to Caroline Dubois to then this person as well. I don't want to say too much. Fingers crossed, and I'm pushing for it to happen. It's sometimes some people like maybe try to put some blockages and things, but I think this one will get over the line. I'm hoping it will get over the line. So look out, hopefully next week for another edition of Unscripted with a big name.
Good stuff. Abdul Rahim, he's come back with another one. He says, what do you think about one of the judges' scorecards with Liam Davis against Shabazz Massoud? Do you think this will improve in the future? Just quickly on that, because I'm sure it was discussed on the live on Monday, which I didn't watch. Sorry, lads. But if I was available to watch it, I would have been available to be on it. But yeah, I thought it was a terrible scorecard. I thought Shabazz Massoud was a clear winner. Actually, maybe even a wide winner. I thought his performance was incredible, actually, considering he was the underdog and on away turf and all the build-up and everything that had happened. I thought his discipline during the fight was amazing. But yeah, I don't know if it'll improve in the future. I hope it will. We don't want it to get to the point where we're seen as like the sick man of Europe, if you like, or the cheating man of Europe. After, I think it used to be Germany and Italy were the main ones where it was hard for British fighters to go and get a decision. And we don't want, obviously these were two British fighters, but we don't want foreign fighters or even fighters that are based with other promoters worrying about going on to away shows and not getting the rub of the green. So we hope it does change. But getting back to Conor Benn, if you are just tuning in, Conor Benn put out a statement on Twitter an hour or so ago, maybe 2 hours ago now, and said that after the latest meeting of the Independent National Anti-Doping Panel, he has now been cleared to fight and cleared of any wrongdoing regarding his case. Eddie Hearn endorsed this, but we have yet to hear from either UKAD or the British Boxing Board of Control, who are the two parties that protested against Conor Benn's suspension being lifted, and it was their appeal that was being heard at the panel. So it'd be good to get more of a 360 view of exactly what's gone on. But broadly, the reception to Conor Benn coming back seems to be maybe a little bit cynical, but also positive. I think fans generally are quite happy to have him back, or maybe just happy that this whole saga seems to be finally coming to an end. Personally, for you, Ayman, how do you feel about Conor Benn's return? Like, is he a fighter that you enjoy watching? Is he someone that you were, quite high on before? No pun intended. Quite high on before the action was taken.
I'm glad you've asked this, because I was one of these fighters, one of these pundits or people watching boxing, and I was really keen on watching Conor Benn's progress throughout his career. I remember during the COVID periods, the lean COVID periods, and Matchroom Boxing, to their credit, had set up Zoom interviews to just keep outlets going, to keep boxing interesting and people interested in boxing as well. And this was off the back of the Conor Benn, the the fight against Paynold and then the comeback from Paynold, although he didn't lose that fight, a lot of people kind of thought this wasn't maybe a win for him or maybe the sport for him. And he's since said that, look, I had to have a hard look at myself and thought about maybe this isn't the one for me. But I took the time to progress and took the time to really look at my career and Tony and boxing and just kind of manage and progress under Tony Sims and become a better fighter. And he came back and he was in blistering form. He looked like he improved in the ring and his technical ability. He was given big knockouts as well too. The Fandor performance was great, and then the subsequent knockouts afterwards. Yeah, sure, there was matchmaking involved with some faded fighters, but he was exciting. He was speaking well, and we were on these Zoom calls. And I remember all the people that were on the calls there were gassing Conor Benn up and saying like, "Well done, you've really kind of kept to your word. You've really kind of kept away and improved yourself. How do you kind of keep your feet on the ground as to all the plaudits that you're getting now?" And Conor took it well. He just kind of said his mentality is to keep his feet on the ground. He doesn't want to, go think of anything as anything more than one step at a time, to paraphrase him. And it was all good reactions, all good responses, and these sort of things really kind of enamor you towards a fighter, make you want to see them do well, of course, and make you appreciate the hard work that's gone on behind the scenes. But when it kind of becomes, when things like this come out, and drugs in sport, drugs in boxing specifically, when it's a combat sport and it involves you having to beat your opponent in some form to the body or head to get a victory, it's a very serious issue. And those serious issues then tend to dash away all that goodwill that you'd been able to foster from the public and from journalists as such, people, reporters in the industry. And there's a lot of kind of, I guess, reputation to build back from that. But there is the opportunity to do that for sure, by giving the information as well too. In terms of him as a fighter, though, absolutely, like I think he's a huge name. It's undeniable that he's a huge name. When you're able to cross over into the mainstream and get on slots like Good Morning Britain, this was even before any of this saga had happened. But when you're able to get onto Good Morning Britain or ITV News, regardless of whether it's because of your dad's name, your name, whatever it is, once you're in that seat and you're able to put yourself in front of um, UK audience, that means you're big. That means that the mainstream audience are interested in you. That means you can cross over into being something more than in and it's not a bad thing, but in the boxing bubble. That means you can become a star. Conor Benn undoubtedly can become a star, and to a degree is, but he has that interest, he has that ability, he has that charisma, I guess, although a lot of people don't like that. But I think for a more casual audience, it resonates, it sells. And in that sort of sense, there's money to be made off of the back of that for him and for companies, boxing in general as well too, and their fights to be made. And that's the bottom line here. Outside of everything, it's not the bottom line, sorry, but in terms of financial sense, that's the bottom line here. In terms of getting him back out, they want him back out, and have wanted him back out as soon as possible, so that they can make those fights, so they can make those big revenue, big UK pay-per-view shows as well. So yeah, undeniably, he's huge fighter. I'll keenly watch his progression and how he's different in the ring. I saw him actually. Seconds Out sent me to Vegas, and I watched him against Pete Dobson, and I thought it was
Pistol
an
Pete.
interesting. Say again, sorry.
Pistol Pete.
Pistol Pete, indeed. I saw him against Pete Dobson. And I thought this could be a tricky matchup. I had a couple of conversations with some other people in the industry who said, "Hey, you know what? I actually think Pete Dobson might get the upset. He's pretty good." I said, "I'm not too sure about that, but I'm sure he'll give a competitive fight to Conor." And he did give a competitive fight to Conor. And I wondered about the matchmaking for that fight. And then I've had conversations with other people in the industry who said Jalil Major Hackett is one to watch and one for the future, and will get to the very top of the sport. And he also then fought Pete Dobson. We were thinking, look, if Jalil Hackett comes in and smashes Pete Dobson, that's going to make Conor Benn look bad. Jalil Hackett didn't do that. Jalil Hackett went the distance against Pete Dobson, and you have to follow that thread through and say that, look, Conor Benn done well at that level. He done well, and he's at that level now. He's been barking and pushing and hollering for those big level fights now. It's got to be that level for Conor Benn. He's got to back up that bark now, and I'm sure he will be in those big fights.
So that's a yes, basically.
No.
Yeah, think about it some more. We've got some nice questions coming from the chat. Again, not all about Ben, but let's go through them anyway. Zambanu Love says, with Frank Warren going to DAZN, is having all UK boxing on a platform that doesn't have English football a backwards step? Ayman, I don't expect a simple yes or no on this one, but what's your initial thoughts on that?
Sorry, Danny, could you repeat that? I just had an interesting message, and if I could shy away from the live for a moment,
Okay.
but I'll answer this question. What was the question again?
So that's Ayman's silent ban ending in real time with the barber. The question was, with Frank Warren going to DAZN, is having all UK boxing on a platform that doesn't have English football a backward step? And I would say, so let Ayman deal with his message, but I would say probably not. Maybe a sideways step. I'd say the issue really is that TNT have only occasionally used the football as as leverage to get people into the boxing. I know they put boxing on after the Champions League final once, which was, I would say genius, but it's pretty obvious. But they don't always do that, and I don't see boxing advertised very often on their football coverage, whereas Sky do, or at least a bit more. I've seen Sky's boxing, and not only pay-per-views, advertised on Sky Sports NFL, on their Premier League football coverage, on the cricket. So I think Sky utilise that a lot better, or maybe prioritise boxing, or have done a little bit more than TNT. That's not to say TNT haven't done a good job. In many ways, they have. But I don't think it's necessarily a backward step. I think the viewership will probably be lower, just because it's, DAZN's obviously got fewer subscribers than TNT's audience. But that's to be expected. And I think for the biggest fights, they'll become a subs driver for DAZN anyway. And to have Frank Warren's fights on the same platform as Matchrooms, Riyadh Season, and so on, that has a benefit within itself because it becomes a destination point, the home kind of hub for boxing. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Ayman, are you back with us? No, Ayman's disappeared. Maybe he's actually having the haircut as we speak. So yeah, that's my view on it. Oh, Ayman's actually on the phone now. This better be good when he comes back because he's left you all waiting. So hopefully it's this hot gossip coming up. Behind the Nut says, do you think Chisora versus White 3 will happen? Yeah, I think I do, actually. I think more people would want to see Chisora White 3 than they want to see Chisora against Jarrell Miller. I also think Dillian White seems really up for it. I saw his social media message earlier today where he said just because of the amount of respect he has for Chisora as a fellow warrior, he'd like them to fight again. I mean, it's partly that, but I'm also sure that it's partly the money involved and the fact that White has 2 victories over Chisora and he can make it a hat trick if they do indeed fight. But obviously White's own licensing issues need to be addressed, and we will find out what happens with that and where Chisora White actually finds a home. But it's something we've wanted to talk about with White's management team not too long ago, and for one reason or another that interview didn't happen. But we'd like to know what his licensing status is and if he can fight either in the UK or in Saudi, which is the most likely venues for a Chisora trilogy fight. Zambanu Love says, is NADP not UKAD? Can UKAD ban or only NADP? UKAD can ban, I believe, but the NADP is the National Anti-Doping Panel. So it goes, any protests or appeals against the ban go before an independent panel. And that's what happened with Conor Benn. He was initially suspended, then went to the independent panel to get that suspension lifted. And then the board and UKAD were against that decision to lift the suspension and appealed against it. So the suspension was reinstated while the appeal was heard. And this is the outcome of that appeal, the results of which came out today. Where are we? Luke Fury got a run cheers for the stream. That was quite a while ago now. So, yeah, no point saying much back to Luke. Lewis Hart says, enjoying this, guys. Thanks, Lewis. Thunder Road says, yes, Conor Benn changed after the first Payno fight. He became more irritable and started getting tattoos, including on his back, to hide the back knee, perhaps. I think you're going a bit far there, Thunder Road, seeing as he's got tattoos covering approximately 85% of his body. Along with small genitals, signs of something usage. Are you insinuating that Conor Benn has small genitals? And if so, how do you know? Bit worried about where this is going. Zambanu Love says, is boxing that mainstream to be on its own channel? In my opinion, it's still a fringe sport that needs to be on the same channel as major sports. I mean, Box Nation sustained itself with, sometimes great, sometimes not so great boxing action for quite some years. So I think being on its own channel isn't necessarily a bad thing. You get the hardcore as a matter of course, and then the casuals come in for the really big fights. Maybe it would work. The Boxing Guru asks, how come you once called yourself Danta Claus on Twitter? Well, I know it might be hard for you to understand because it is a pretty complex pun, but my name is Danny, and Santa Claus is a figure associated with Christmas. And I think it was over the Christmas period that I did that. Nice to have you here, Boxing Guru. Sure, I'd banned you. CMP Russell CMP says boxing is as scripted as Corrie. We'll have no Corrie slander on here, Russell. You know this. ECW 787 says put him in with Ennis. Ennis will destroy him with ease. Ouch. Is Ayman still on the phone? No, Ayman's there, but he's got himself muted.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm here. Danny, I got off the phone and had a conversation with a source and a little bit of tidbit information. So take it as you will. I believe that UKAD are writing up a statement as we speak, and that will be out imminently. That could be half an hour, that could be a day, but I presume it'll be more so as sooner as possible. It does, just in terms of that, it does sort of ring a little bit odd that these sort of things, statements usually kind of are timed at around the same time. I'm not saying that there's anything too much into that, and it might be that they will corroborate, but just an interesting little context to that. But we'll await that statement as well, and we'll be on top of that a seconds out as to when that does eventually drop. But there will be a statement coming from UKAD.
Well, I've just had a message too from Conor Benn on Instagram, and he's just asked how the live's going. I've said it's very supportive so far. He said that's great, and I've asked him to join us. I don't know if he will, but lines of communication are open, so we shall see. But yeah, he seems happy, of course. Laura says he is there. Not sure what that's about. Yeah, so we'll see if he ends up joining us. I've asked a couple of other people, but I think there's journalists and other fighters out there who aren't not just unwilling to come on our stream at the moment, but also not really wanting to talk about it until they've seen a statement from UKAD or the Board of Control. So we're all kind of in the same boat on that score. But yeah, I mean, I'm not staying on, excuse me, this live for a whole day. So hopefully it is sooner rather than later if we're going to discuss it on here. But Ayman, before you had to go off and speak to your source, you were talking about how much you've enjoyed watching Conor Benn. You kind of invested in his career. How much of an impact do you think this whole thing, even if he is completely cleared of wrongdoing now, 2 years later, how much of an impact do you think this has on his earning potential, his commercial potential, his popularity?
I don't think all that popularity is different to earning potential. I think Conor Benn is still huge. I think he says it there in the statement. Thank you to my backers there, Matchroom Boxing, a huge boxing promotional company. Of course, they've kept by him through the whole process. And then the other one is Everlast, a big, huge promotional sponsor within boxing and sport in general. A big company. And when you see kind of big companies like that, and they're thanked for their support, they're thanked for their help throughout those sort of processes, that means that Conor Benn can attract and keep those types of big companies, even in amongst this past 2 years. So now that it seems to be that he's cleared to fight and cleared of any wrongdoing, as he says, and had no case to answer, as it's paraphrased as well too, I only imagine that commercially there'll be more people looking to come on board as the fights get bigger, as the finances become bigger as well too. I anticipate that he'll get more kind of financial reward, and I don't think his stock in that sense is all that diminished. In terms of popularity, though, reputation is one of those things, and you can look at it from different ways. One of those ways is, first of all, that indifference is, you never want indifference. We know, being wrestling fans to a large degree, that whenever you're a wrestler and you come out and you have no pop, no reaction, that's not great, because sooner or later you'll be out the door. But in boxing, that's even worse, because it's a smaller pool, a smaller fan base, And if you're not able to resonate, you can't sell tickets, you don't draw viewership, you don't get the opportunities. Conor Benn now is either loved or he's hated, and to Floyd Mayweather sold himself on being hated. Even Naz, to a degree, people wanted to tune in to watch him getting knocked out. Bottom line is though that they paid. I think people will tune in and people will want to see Ben get knocked out, and that sells a ticket, that sells a DAZN subscription, that sells a pay-per-view, and that sells a conversation as well too. I think a lot of people, judging by his Twitter as well too, seem to just be happy to have Conor Benn back, and have supported him as well through the process, which is fair enough. That's the way they wanted to go about it, which is fine. Um, but I don't think popularity I don't think it's too much of a factor in terms of actual in a boxing sense. Hardcore boxing fans carry a lot of weight, though. He will still get trolled as well, I think, throughout his career for this. That's going to be a bit of an issue, but unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess it depends on the way you look at it. The hardcore boxing fans, it's a loud voice, but it's a small, loud voice, and carries most loud when boxing's at its quietest, as opposed to when boxing's at its biggest. And when Ben fights, Ben's at its biggest. So I think those voices get drowned out. Um, so I don't think it will affect all that much, to be honest with you. I think Conor Benn, I think he's in for a huge, huge paydays coming forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a number of fighters in the past kind of ensconced in these PED scandals, and some are found to be innocent, some are found to be unintentionally having taken them and served bans, and history hasn't really reflected too badly on them. You think of Canelo with the whole Mexican meat thing, and I know he proved it was from contaminated meat, and he had all his receipts and so on, but it hasn't affected him adversely. He's still regarded as one of the best fighters in the sport, and certainly one of the biggest draws. So I think Conor Benn, if he goes on to achieve big things, will be just fine. I think, if he never makes it beyond, say, European fringe world level, then this could be used as a stick to beat him with. But, winners get to write the history. That's the saying, isn't it? Or history is written by the winners. And I think if he carries on winning and gets to the very top, then he can kind of write his own story to a large extent. Thunder Road says Ayman's source is Lawrence Okoli. Very clever there, Thunder Road. Zambanu Love says, don't most fighters who cheat have pre-made excuses? We don't know, do we? What stops others using the same excuse Ben did, either tainted supplements or food? I doubt he's provided samples, batch codes to be tested. Well, we don't know until we hear from either him or UKAD or whoever. But yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Does it set a precedent? But if it does, it means fighters are willing to risk being banned for 2 years, or not banned, sorry, I misspoke there, but being out of action for 2 years, whatever the reason was. This has held up his career regardless of guilt or innocence. So, you'd have to, if you were willing to cheat, you'd have to be doing it for a real big payday to then, take that time off afterwards. Jack Hill says, will he now be egg bound or steroid bound? I mean, that's even worse. But yeah, I wish him all the best, even though he's just said he's not doing any interviews. So he probably won't be joining us on the SO live stream. But yeah, if he has indeed been cleared to fight and cleared of any wrongdoing, the latter probably being more important in terms of public perception than the former, then I would like to see him back in the ring, and I would like to see him succeed, because if he was innocent this whole time, it's a hell of an ordeal that he's had to go through. And I know people say, yeah, but, he's got loads of money, he doesn't really need to fight, and it's still hard mentally and emotionally to go through something like this, particularly if you are innocent and everyone's castigating you. So yeah, I mean, I would wish him all the best if that's what comes out. The boxing guru is now having a pop at my hairline. I'm not sure who the boxing guru is and why he feels the need to attack me personally so much. Maybe I've done something to him in the past, but yeah, maybe keep it out of the chat, mate. You can always email me a shitload of abuse if it makes you happy. No one else can, by the way. I'm not opening it up to everyone. But yeah, so Ayman, we're kind of rounding down now, but when do you expect to see Conor Benn back in the ring? I know it's hard to say. And do you expect it to be straight into a Eubank Jr. fight?
What's the timeline here for dates? Let's have a quick look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the possibility of Conor Benn jumping in on the Usyk versus Fury date. So are we 6-7 weeks away? I think 6 full weeks by my timings here. Looking at my calendar, unless I've completely counted wrong, I need to go back to year 2 or 3. That's tight, but depending on an opponent, that's doable. So it's not out the realms of possibility that Conor Benn could jump on that fight in a fight to shake any ring rust off. So I don't think you could rule that out until, I guess, unless any further developments happen in in these circumstances. But more likely, I would imagine that Ben would be coming back in January or February, or early as possible. Basically, I think they'll need to strike whilst the iron's hot and kind of regain as much momentum as possible. But I'd like to see some words backed up from Ben in the past as well too, saying about the type of fights he'd jump back into and the level that he wants to jump back into. If that's the case, then jump back in at the highest level. Go straight for, well, people will debate whether Eubank Jr. is the highest level, but the highest profile. Jump back in with Eubank Jr. You've called out on here on Twitter. If I can pull it up, but I'm pretty sure John Boots Ennis has had the smoke from Conor Benn before. I'm pretty sure that Devin Haney has had the smoke from Conor Benn before. Gervonta Davis here is getting it from Conor Benn as well too.
You didn't call him a midget or something along those lines.
Oompa Loompa is the. He could use some of your puns, Danny. That's for sure.
I don't know. Gervonta Lumpa's not bad.
I'm not a fan.
Not quite right, is it? But I don't mind it.
No, yeah, it doesn't quite work. But either way, the highest level. These 2 years have meant pretty much 2 years of near inactivity. So you're 28, 29 now. You're heading towards those peak years, and you've got to make the most of those if you are indeed clear to fight. So I think that means, for me as an observer, the big fights. No tune-ups, no waiting around. Jump straight into them.
David Wibberley says, Ben is very exciting to watch, and I look forward to seeing if he can win world titles. Zambanu Love says, it's strange. Anytime a high-profile fighter fails a test, it's contamination. It's more likely they cheated, so can understand fans jumping to conclusions. Well, that's it. You know, the fact that cheating in boxing is so prevalent does tar everyone with the same brush. And there are rare but genuine instances of contamination or unknowing use in terms of, you know, the Enzo Macronelli ban that I referenced earlier. So I want to thank you all for tuning in to this impromptu edition of SO Live. Credit Ayman for reacting to this breaking news so quickly. If you haven't already, please do give us a thumbs up and a subscribe. And if you're watching this on playback rather than live, please do leave some comments and we do respond to those as well. As is customary for any edition of SO Live, even those that happen to take place inexplicably on a Wednesday, the closing remarks go to Mr. Ayman Khan.
Danny, lovely to be back with you on Seconds Out Live and all the listeners and contributors in the chat as well, to hopping on at any time, any place, anywhere, any moment to cover the breaking news, as does Seconds Out, covering boxing, the length and breadth of the country and worldwide as well too. Will be abreast of all the latest breaking news and developments in boxing, whether it be Conor Benn or otherwise. I'll be out in the field tomorrow for the Frank Warren press conference. And of course, assimilating as many interviews, collating as many interviews as possible. A couple of good interviews coming up as well very soon on the channel, involving heavyweights and former heavyweight coaches as well too. So do keep an eye out for that. But I thank everyone as well for jumping on as well too on such short notice. Nearly got through without a stutter or a stumble. But we will stutter and stumble out of Seconds Out Live for now, and we'll see you guys on the next one.